Out here, there's no one way of doing things. No unwritten rules. And no shortage of adventure. Because out here, the only requirement is having fun. Bank of America invites kids 6 to 18 to golf with us. For a limited time, sign them up for a free 1-year membership, giving them access to discounted tee times at thousands of courses. Learn more at bankofamerica.com/golf with us. What would you like the power to do? Bank of America. Restrictions apply. See BofA.com/golf with us for complete details. Copyright 2025 Bank of America Corporation.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You might say all kinds of stuff when things go wrong, but these are the words you really need to remember. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. They've got options to fit your unique insurance needs, meaning you can talk to your agent to choose the coverage you need, have coverage options to protect the things you value most, file a claim right on the State Farm mobile app, and even reach a real person when you need to talk to someone. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
All right, let's talk more about that Facebook deal to buy Instagram. Instagram, for those of you who may not know, is a photo-sharing app, kind of a postcard type situation. And
back in 2012, Facebook, now called Meta, bought Instagram for approximately $1 billion.
It was not that much of a surprise because Facebook was struggling.
Paresh Dave is a senior writer at Wired.
They were trying to create sort of photo sharing tools. They were trying to enter the mobile era. But at the time, there was a lot of buzz about Instagram. They had just raised, I think, $500 million or something crazy like that. And all of a sudden, a couple days later, Facebook Meta scooped them up.
Then 2 years later, Zuckerberg made another purchase, this time WhatsApp, for approximately $19 billion.
It was an era where people were talking about WeChat and how that was the Chinese super app where you could do everything. And so it was kind of, a natural continuation of that Facebook would want to try to compete in that space and have WhatsApp become a super app and not just a social media app or a chat app.
Did anyone at the time think that this shouldn't be happening, that Facebook shouldn't be buying up Instagram and then WhatsApp? Did anybody have a problem with this?
I don't think there was as much of a tide of anti-big tech sentiment because it wasn't, considered a big tech at that point. It took a few more years. So at the time, it was just par for the course for Silicon Valley, for these big companies to scoop up smaller startups from time to time. Apple, was really known for it back then. Google, was only a few years off of buying YouTube. It was totally normal. It was seen as the way that these tech companies grow. These were a new era of tech companies, but you go back to the older era of tech companies like an Oracle or an HP. This was totally normal to see something like this happen.
Thinking about those two purchases within the span of a couple years, did that shake up the social media scene?
Yes, it's hard to say. I mean, that's sort of what we're debating now.
We're debating it now because Mark Zuckerberg and his company Meta are trying to convince a judge that those two purchases from over a decade ago, both Instagram and WhatsApp, were legal. This week, the FTC and Meta began a trial to determine if Meta's purchases violated antitrust law. Now, the government says Meta created an illegal social media monopoly when it bought the two companies. And the outcome of the trial could have far-reaching consequences.
It's huge. Facebook could be forced to sell off Instagram and WhatsApp. Think about Instagram being over 50% of Meta's advertising revenue in the US. Losing all of that, it's a big deal.
Today on the show, Meta goes to court in a landmark antitrust case that could upend the tech industry. I'm Shayna Roth, filling in for Lizzie O'Leary. You're listening to What Next TBD, a show about technology, power, and how the future will be determined. Stick around.
Spring savings are in the air, and at Ross, where they have savings on all the brands you love. From the latest fashion to outdoor decor and even pet supplies, savings are in every aisle. Go to Ross and save 20 to 60% off other retailers' prices on your favorite spring finds.
This podcast is brought to you by Tech Unheard. If you've always had a curiosity and fascination with technology and the minds behind it that are actively shaping our future, tune in to Tech Unheard. ARM, an innovative tech leader, is partnering with NPM to bring you a podcast series that lets you listen in on one-on-one conversations with industry leaders as they discuss everything from the potential of artificial general intelligence to keynote nerves. Hosted by ARM CEO Renee Haas, Tech Unheard explores the drivers behind each leader's path and analyzes the most pressing trends in their space, all while sharing a few entertaining anecdotes of success and failure along the way. Tune in to Tech Unheard from ARM and NPM wherever you get your podcasts. This case started in 2020. The FTC alleges Meta, formerly known as Facebook, engaged in anti-competitive practices by swallowing up new competitors to their business, specifically Instagram and WhatsApp.
The argument from the FTC is that these two acquisitions, WhatsApp, Instagram, enabled Meta to legally maintain a monopoly, that these acquisitions were aimed at taking out competition, bolstering Facebook, taking out these things that were nipping at the heels of Facebook, and allowing Facebook to continue to thrive in now a newly constrained market. And the FTC's argument is that violates U.S. antitrust law.
The case has been moving slowly through the court system. That's for a few reasons. One is just that this is kind of how these things are. Another is that initially, the judge in this case didn't buy the arguments the FTC was making. The FTC had to refile their case. The narrowing of the lawsuit took a bit of time. And Meta, of course, fought back when they could. That gets us to the trial now. Here's where my brain runs into an obstacle course. It's how the FTC is trying to differentiate the way Meta's social media platforms work versus others. Can you walk us through what they're saying there? I mean, is it more about connecting with people as opposed to videos like you would on YouTube? Because the FTC is basically saying that, you know, they've taken over this particular space.
The FTC is arguing that Facebook operates in this world known as personal social networking services, and that Facebook's competitors, this is Facebook, you know, the blue app, not Meta overall as a company, but, you know, Facebook, the old social network from the Harvard days 2 decades ago, that its competitors today are effectively Snapchat and this thing called MeWe that not a lot of people have heard about. And that TikTok, which we all, you know, probably view as a huge competitor for Facebook, is not a competitor for Facebook. Neither is YouTube. Neither is Twitter/X. That all those things are more about following creators, not about following family and friends. And the FTC says that Facebook, in Mark Zuckerberg's own words, you know, when he founded Facebook, where Facebook was meant to connect with family and friends. And that justifies this sort of very narrow market. And that it's significant because when you consider just Snapchat and MeWe as competitors to Facebook, Facebook has a 80% plus market share. But when you throw in TikTok, when you throw in YouTube, Facebook's, you know, market share falls way, way, way down, and they don't look like a monopoly anymore.
Is this a stretch? I mean, are there actual differences here? Because it feels like when I think of social media and I think of all these different platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all of them, they're doing the same things, maybe just to varying degrees.
That's what the judge has to reckon with. I mean, evidence has started to come out at trial this week. And I think part of the FTC's argument is that over time, yes, Facebook shifted. It became more video heavy. It became a little bit more like TikTok. It became a little bit more like YouTube, these other things that are not Snapchat and MeWe. But that it did so maybe less because of competitive pressure and because, you know, they just made sort of decisions along the way to pull back from family and friends kind of sharing. And it was Facebook's own undoing, like it was their own unraveling. They made their product worse. And that rather than improving the product and really competing, Facebook was able to get away with like pounding us with more ads, pounding us with less of what we wanted. And that was totally okay. And that sort of degrading in quality could be an example of a harm to consumers from Facebook's anti-competitive behavior.
So let's talk a little bit about Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta. He took the witness stand earlier this week, and he's had a lot of his own words, I think particularly some emails from back in 2012, being really used against him. What stood out to you about his testimony?
I would say that he's trying to defend and reframe all these things he said back then about trying to neutralize the competition or bury the competition, that buying is better than competing. All of those things probably, not great for him in the eyes of the judge who is presiding over this trial. There's no jury.
It's rough stuff to try and walk back.
Yeah, but at the same time, Meta's argument is that these things that Mark said back then don't matter. What matters is whether Facebook, was a monopoly back then. Is Facebook a monopoly now? And if you can't establish Facebook was a monopoly, throughout this period, there's no case here.
Yeah, it's such an interesting court case in that way because the FTC is trying to argue that intent matters, whereas Meta, it seems, is trying to argue that only the outcome matters, which I feel like is something that we don't see very often in court cases.
Exactly. Like, has the market gotten worse? Are consumers worse off? Are advertisers worse off? Is there something that we are lacking in the social networking world that we would have had Facebook not bought Instagram and WhatsApp? I mean, it's hard to say in some ways, but the FTC is saying, yeah, you can look at it. Like, there's too many ads on Facebook. And that is a direct line to these acquisitions.
Last year, we saw Google lose a case over ad practice, and now we're awaiting what punishment Google might face. What would a victory or a loss for Meta look like in this case that's being argued right now?
Yeah, the Google one was over Google's search and search advertising monopoly. Here, a loss for Meta basically means that there would be a second trial at some point in the future where the same judge would decide what the penalties are. Should that divestment, should Meta be forced to sell off, separate in some form or fashion Instagram and WhatsApp into independent companies? Should there be some kind of restrictions on doing similar deals in the future? Maybe the FTC has to do a thorough review of every Meta acquisition in the future, even the tiniest ones. There could be a whole host of conditions. The expectation is that the judge will sort of look to that Google case because the penalties trial in the Google case is about to begin. So, if Meta loses by the time that happens, the judge in the Meta case will have the Google case to look to as an exemplar of what to do in this kind of situation.
Speaking of that Google case, on Thursday, a federal judge ruled that Google had acted illegally to maintain a monopoly in some of the online advertising industry. After the break, Donald Trump isn't in the courtroom, but he may as well be. This podcast is sponsored by Udacity. You might be wondering how certain people are landing tech jobs with high-earning salaries, unlimited PTO, remote work, and free lunch. Well, learning the skills that companies need can help you get there. Udacity is an online learning platform with courses in AI, data, programming, and more. With Udacity, you're not just passively watching videos or reading articles. You're doing practical exercises and projects that prepare you for the job you want. With real-world projects and human experts that grade your work, you'll truly get the skills you need. When you have a certification from Udacity, recruiters and employers take notice. So for a better job, better salary, and better skills, check out Udacity today. The tech field is always evolving, and you should be too. You can try Udacity risk-free for 7 days. Head to udacity.com/TBD and use code TBD for 40% off your order. Once again, that's udacity.com/TBD for 40% off, and make sure you use promo code TBD. This podcast is brought to you by OpenPhone. If you're running a business, you know how important it is to stay connected to your customers, and having a flexible and efficient phone system is essential to succeed. Introducing OpenPhone, the #1 business phone system that streamlines and scales your customer communications. OpenPhone works through an app on your phone or computer, and your team can share one number and collaborate on customer calls and texts like a shared inbox. That way, any teammate can pick up right where the last person left off, keeping response times faster than ever. So whether you're a one-person operation or have a large team that needs better collaboration tools, check out OpenPhone. OpenPhone is offering TBD listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/TBD. That's OPENPHONE.com/TBD. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone. No missed calls, no missed customers.
This episode is brought to you by Discover. It's smart to always have a few financial goals, and here's a really smart one you can set: earning cash back on what you buy every day. With Discover, you can. Get this, Discover automatically matches all the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year. Seriously, all of it. Discover trusts you to make smart decisions. After all, you listen to this show. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
This lawsuit was filed way back in 2020, which, for those keeping track, was during Donald Trump's first administration. In terms of Trump's relationship to Mark Zuckerberg, it was a very different time.
During the first Trump administration, I mean, President Trump had a ton of hostility towards Facebook, right? He argued that there was conservative bias there, that there was meddling in the election, that Mark Zuckerberg was funding these initiatives related to like election and voter turnout and election technology, and that Facebook was just messing with things, that it was way worse than 2016 when, one might argue that Facebook helped Donald Trump win the election in some way. And 2020 was the exact opposite. But there was also this general big tech anti-sentiment in Trump's first term that sort of led to this lawsuit. Where the relationship really changed was January 6, 2021, and the Capitol insurrection. After that, Facebook banned Donald Trump's account, and that's where things got really tense.
Yeah, let's talk more about that, because there has been a big shift between the Zuckerberg and Trump relationship in Trump 1.0 versus now Trump 2.0. What has Zuckerberg been doing to get closer to Trump?
We've seen a few things. Mark Zuckerberg and sort of Facebook Meta settled this lawsuit that Trump had filed about his account being banned. And part of the settlement was a donation to President Trump's Presidential Library Fund. We saw Meta donate to Trump's inauguration fund, which they hadn't done the previous time. We've also seen that Facebook, Instagram have relaxed some of their policies around content moderation in ways that you could argue Republicans support. So there's been this effort to really come out and say, like, maybe we don't endorse President Trump, but we are supportive of where things are headed. We are going to not challenge his policies. We're not going to say, we are going to keep our DEI policy and sue you to keep it. Like, there's a lot of things that maybe Mark Zuckerberg of 2017 would be expected to do that are not happening now. And instead, the very opposite are happening.
What I found interesting was that the New York Times reported that Mark Zuckerberg had been lobbying Trump to resolve the antitrust case. And it seems to fit into this broader political sphere where tech guys are trying to get in with Trump. In general, I mean, if Meta loses, what was the point of Zuckerberg trying to cozy up with the Trump administration?
Like I said, the consequences are huge, right? Losing Instagram, losing WhatsApp. Like, WhatsApp doesn't have a ton of revenue just yet, but investors are very excited about the prospects. It's key to Meta's future. Like, losing those two things is huge. So it makes total sense that Mark Zuckerberg would lay out all the stops to try to prevent this. And if that means, cozying up to Trump, like, I guess that makes good business sense for them. But I think it's also important to say that, like, a lot of people in the FTC circles, former officials, former commissioners, they say it's totally inappropriate for Meta, for Mark Zuckerberg to have been trying to get the president to intervene here, that the FTC is meant to be an independent agency, generally with 3 commissioners of one party, 2 of another. Right now, there's just 3 Republican commissioners, and, wholly inappropriate for them to have tried to intervene here.
So in February, the FTC launched an inquiry into what they call tech censorship. And Republicans have long complained about censorship on social media platforms. And at the same time, they classically have also been against government intervention in business. Is all of this just a sort of like manifestation of everyone disliking big tech, but they only have one legal lever to pull to try and get back at Meta?
I think there's something to that. Trump at this point might appreciate Mark Zuckerberg. He might appreciate Meta and what they've quote unquote done for him. At the end of the day, though, if the FTC's argument is to, be believed, Facebook did something wrong. It did something illegal, and Trump might believe it's worthwhile to have the company punished for its past misdeeds, that, those shouldn't be overlooked. Something illegal was done. There should be a penalty for that, regardless of, how things look today.
An interesting little wrinkle in all of this is that the judge in the case is James Boasberg, who was recently overseeing some of Trump's El Salvador deportation cases. How do you think the Trump administration's behavior in Boasberg's courtroom over the last few weeks and months will influence how this case plays out?
I would have to believe that he views the FTC as a separate entity from, Trump's Department of Homeland Security or Trump's Department of Justice. He seems to be having his own thoughts about that case. I mean, another wrinkle here is that he has admitted that he barely uses Facebook. He barely understands what Facebook is. And earlier this month, they had to have a whole tech tutorial, I guess is what it's called in court parlance, where an FTC folks and then Meta folks walked him through how Facebook works and how the technology at play in the cases. But I think the other stuff happening with immigrants and, those cases, I think he can separate what's going on there versus here.
How are other social media companies feeling about this case? I'm guessing they're watching it extremely closely. What are they worried about?
Imagine the government coming to you 15, 20 years later and saying, this acquisition that you did, we want it undone. We don't believe you should have been allowed to buy this company, and we need you to sell it. Imagine that happened maybe for political grounds. A future president who's unhappy with a particular tech company or a social media company and just wants to force a sale because they're unhappy. And, it's sort of like political expediency. I think that's concerning to a lot of companies. It is hard to plan, hard to sort of see into the future when someone is coming at you way down the road and trying to get you to sell off a vast part of your business. This is how Silicon Valley has always worked, by doing these acquisitions. So it's a huge challenge for venture capitalists, for the investment community, if they are unable to sell to the big tech companies because the big tech companies are so skittish about doing these deals because it could be unwound at any time.
How long do we expect this case to go on for?
About 40 days, but in not perfect continuation, so in chunks. So it may not wrap up until right before the July 4th holiday.
In your piece, you said it was hard to predict who was going to win this case, but some experts view the FTC as a bit of an underdog. Now that the trial is underway, do you have a prediction?
I do not have a prediction. It's still
for the journalist.
It's still way too early. We've just had a couple of days of testimony. Yes, most of the testimony, well, all the testimony so far has been from Mark Zuckerberg, and he is, quote unquote, the star witness in the eyes of many observers. The FTC, as we said, still has a long way to go in trying to lay the foundation here to show that there is actual harm. They have a long road ahead.
Paresh Dave, thank you so much for coming on the show and lending us your expertise.
Appreciate it. A wonderful way to spend my day.
Paresh Dave covers tech for Wired. And that is it for our show today. What Next TBD is produced by Patrick Fort. Our show is edited by Evan Campbell. Slate is run by Hillary Fry. TBD is part of the larger What Next family. And if you're looking for even more Slate podcasts to listen to, check out Wednesday's What Next, which is all about how the Trump administration is trying to make an example out of Maine, looking for ways to punish the state because the governor told Trump no. We'll be back on Sunday with another episode about how technology has and hasn't changed how we raise our kids. I'm Shayna Roth, in for Lizzie O'Leary. Thanks for listening.
Prescription products require completion of an online medication consultation with an independent healthcare provider through the LifeMD platform and are only available if prescribed. Subscription required. Individual results may vary. Additional restrictions apply at lifemd.com. Read all warnings before using GLP-1s. Side effects may include a risk of thyroid C-cell tumors. Do not use GLP-1s if you or your family have a history of thyroid cancer.
Should GLP-1 weight loss medication like Wegovy and Zepbound cost thousands of dollars? We don't think so. TryLifeMD.com helps provide insurance access to the leading GLP-1 medications. Visit TryLifeMD.com and check your eligibility for GLP-1 medication with copays as low as $0. Listen to Bridget's story after losing 55 pounds and using her insurance for coverage.
LifeMD helped me get covered with my insurance. Finding out that it was covered was huge. I've lost 55 pounds. I am so much healthier now that I've lost the weight. I would never be able to do it without them.
Get started today and check your eligibility for GLP-1 medication with copays as low as $0 at TryLifeMD.com. That's TryLifeMD.com.